I'm reading William Rogers' confession. The immediate locality of the massacre of the immigrant party is about 4 miles from the ranch on the road leading south. The valley at the place slopes gently towards the south. A small ravine runs parallel with the road on the right hand side at the spot. Well, do you see a ravine running parallel with the road? I'll be on Google Earth. This is the ravine that I've shown in other videos that crosses the road and then enters in here. Where does the road run parallel? It is about 4 miles to Hamblin's from here. The ground for a distance of more than 100 yards around the central point was covered with the skeletons and bones of human beings, interspersed in places with rolls or bunches of tangled or matted hair, from which its length evidently belonged to females. In places the bones of small children were lying side by side with those of grown persons, as if parent and child had met death at the same instant and with the same stroke. Skipping ahead, in a gulch or a hole in the ravine by the side of the road, a large number of leg and arm bones and also of skulls could be seen sticking above the surface as if they had been buried there, but the action of the water and the digging of the wolves had again exposed them to sight. The entire scene was too horrible and sickening for language adequately to describe. So I'm also confused. Why would you cross this ravine and camp in here? This wasn't nearly as wide in 1857, but it was still a ravine. It was maybe 10 feet deep. I know it was more than 5 feet deep. To bring wagons all across this? Anyhow, this is the route. This would be the California Trail. This spot does come out at about 1.25 miles. But where's the parallel ravine? Well, once you know this story, John D. Lee's confession isn't that good a confession. So skipping ahead, in places around the corral, human bones and imperfect skeletons were lying on the ground. Son-in-law of John D. Lee. He claims he saw the immigrants, spoke with them twice. It contained about 40 wagons, 700 or 800 head of cattle. The immigrants entered the valley on a Friday. The men with whom he conversed told him they were anxious to stop a few days and rest and recruit their stock before entering the desert. They appeared perfectly civil and gentlemanly. He recommended the vicinity of the spring at the south end of the meadows, which they were going to anyhow. Saw them again the next morning. Some of the men were looking for loose, lost cattle, and he saw them driving some loose cattle back to camp. He never saw any of the party afterwards. Well, we know that he saw them at least once when he went to the Mountain Meadows Massacre site and did what he had to do. So Shirt says that he heard gunfire, but basically he didn't do anything. So we'll just move on from that. So Rogerson, who's traveling with Dr. Forney, who's collecting the children, that's part of the object of this whole story in the confession. They go to John D. Lee's place in Harmony, and the doctor demands that Lee return the property belonging to the murdered immigrants. But Lee says he doesn't have any property belonging to the immigrants. Lee claims to Forney that he wasn't present at the site at the time of the crime, just afterwards. And Lee, before he is put to death, never said a kind word about any of these people, not the children or the immigrants themselves. In fact, when Forney's speaking with him, Forney says that they were slandering the Mormons, and they were a foul and indecent lot. You see a lot of Indians in these illustrations, but really, almost all the Indians were Mormons. At the most, in my opinion, there were 40 Indians there. Could have been less. Could have been more. I'm going to skip over some of what Rogerson covers because it's not relevant to the death of the people here. But he bumps into some Indians that admit that a portion of them were present after the attack began at the corral, but denied they joined in it. Now there's many that say only Mormons made the first attack. If that's true, and it's true that some Indians were killed, their knees shattered, some other incidents, then it had to have happened after the first attack, and for Mormon strategy is placed on the day of the first attack. Mormons shift dates, diaries, they'll shift everything around, just like quicksand. So one of the Indians says a white man came to them and exhibited a letter that they stated was from Brigham Young and that it directed them to go and help whip the immigrants. This was Huntington that came down with the letter. Same Huntington who describes in his diary Brigham Young giving all the cattle on the southern route to the Indians, which means have at it with the people that own the cattle. A chief of the band stated that his brother was killed by a shot from the corral at a distance of 200 yards while he was running across the meadow. I should remember that name, but I can't now. These Indians also stated the Mormons who killed the immigrants were painted so as to resemble Indians. Well, we all know that. Indians denied they received any of the stock or property from the immigrants except for a few old clothes. Well, there's a story of a wagon coming up with a bunch of the Paiutes, things just packed with clothes and stuff under the clothes that couldn't be ID'd by the people telling the story. So in this story, the Indians refer to Bishop Lee, John D., as Naw-Guts. That's the one that means crybaby. Apparently Lee could work up tears if he wanted to. Rogerson also describes how empty all the little towns are, including Cedar City, when they come through. People just, people all along here are just running for the hills. The total population down in this area, I'll show you on a map in a moment, it's about 2,200 people total at the time. Here's Salt Lake and Pro. But if you took all this territory down in here, all of this, you'd be dealing with about 2,200 people. And he describes every little town as almost empty when they come through here. Cedar City became almost a ghost town. So many people left Cedar City after the massacre. For this area, about the same number of Indians. Now they told Carl Schurz they were going to be there for a few days and move on. They didn't say that to just Carl Schurz. But what was 5 days behind them was the Duke's wagon train with a few hundred head of cattle. And I don't remember the number of people. But the Duke's train was also waylaid, and it was kept intentionally from approaching the Mountain Meadows. And when it did get to the Mountain Meadows, a circuitous route was taken around it. So the Mormons had to act because these people had to realize that the Duke's train would have to reach them in a certain number of days, and if it wasn't, then why not? So when John D. Lee comes in spewing lies to the wagon train on why they need to surrender their guns and so on, it had to involve a story with the Duke's train. There had to be a lie involving the Duke's train, because they'd be asking, where's the Duke's train? Oh, they're up north surrounded by Indians and we're trying to help them too. So Mountain Meadows. Up to here, the crime scene. Now, we still don't see a ravine running parallel. This is where the crime is. We're zoomed in. The elevation over here, right in here, is like 5860. Here it's 5845. And getting out here, 5825, 5811. Okay. So, where is the road? The California road came down this way. This could even be part of it. Of course, the Mormons came through here and built this highway, I assume under the WPA stuff. Be one way of concealing your crime and making some money. And this ravine wasn't nearly as broad or deep in 1857. Kind of doubled in the heavy rains of 62. Right by all things Mormon, you know. So let's go to page 87. August 31st, 1857 and July 17th, 1863. Okay. It's the 63 one we want. Disastrous flood from a series of cloudbursts. Rising Pine Creek to 15 or 20 feet. Swept houses away, drowned 4 children. On Pinto Creek, no lives lost, but serious damage to properties, some stock lost. But August 31st is 10 days before the Fancher murders. Flood brought down all bridges for 7 miles up canyon, tore away the sawmill dam, broke out the ox farm, frame dam on Cricket Creek, grist mill dam covered with drift and rubbish. Well, apparently that was William Dame writing to George A. Smith that the bridges for 7 miles up, etc. Then this is Walker Leonard Turley's book. After the massacre, rumors circulated that the Parowan city gates had been closed to the immigrants. The problem may have been nothing more than muck and water. I got a feeling it was a little bit more than muck and water. They did not want to let the immigrants see their military strength because they were preparing to butcher the Fancher Baker train. There's a list of over 20 Mormons I've found that traveled with or camped with, traded with, interacted with the Fancher Baker train. From all down here in this Provo area, all the way down, some of them traveled for days. Didn't have anything bad to say. Some that interacted were the murderers at Mountain Meadows. Some of those have bad things to say. But the people that weren't involved, that traveled with this train, none of them have anything bad to say. That's another video. So let's try and clear up Roger's issue with this ravine along the road. I'm in the process of putting all these people on this road with them, and that'll be a video of its own in the near future. So about the time of the flood then, on the 31st, this wagon train is coming in here. You just never hear anything about the wagon train in relationship to this storm. This storm is like a non-event, but it's a big deal. Anyhow, it's 25 miles to Cedar City. They're there on the 3rd. Then they travel from Cedar City out here to Mountain Meadows, and they're there on the 6th. Mormons are with them all the time. This whole time. All the way up, interacting with them. It's not emphasized enough in my opinion. So anyhow, this is the rim of the basin. This is the water that flows southerly. All this water that would flow northerly. This is a dividing line. And that's the Mormon euphemism, taking a Gentile over the rim of the basin. That's to exalt him, to blood atone him, to purify him in some Mormon sense. Anyhow, we want to find a piece of road that is parallel to a ravine. That means the road would have to go this way for some distance and then turn out. However, if we go a half mile north, still next to the highway, we do have a ravine here. So he's saying he's seeing bodies. This would make sense, even though everything else places it a half mile down the road. He's saying he's moving along here, and he's seeing bodies. This is where the maps I'm showing you, the ravine. Alright, but up here is a half a mile. Here's your road to Pinto today. There's a motocross track right here. Anyhow, there's a ravine going right up this way. So that's as far as we're going to get today.